what are those like red flags? Like, I'm in a toxic relationship. Oh my God, I didn't realize.
Any type of relationship has a small amount of toxicity in it. Victim blaming is a huge sign of manipulation. It's about the aggressor trying to gain this power and control over that other person, right? The criticism. If you are constantly being criticized with what you're wearing, what you're doing, how you're speaking.
It starts off small and then it just grows. What's up, you guys? My name is Mahdi.
And I'm Ramsey.
And this is what they won't say. Nope.
Bitch. Sorry, I had to do it.
Okay, well, we have a guest in the room.
We do.
We are joined with Marwa Nasser, therapist in clinical mental health counseling.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
That was the wrong tune.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here. You couldn't hear the sound effect, but we were clapping for you.
Well, thank you.
Of course. Today's a very special episode. Very excited. Mental health check? Absolutely. Mental health check. So, they can't hear you.
That's enough.
We had technical difficulties. We had a third microphone that did not work for Marwa.
I broke it on accident.
And so we are switching the microphones back and forth today. My mental health.
How have you been this week? Let's hear it.
9. It's been
all
pretty
around?
good. Yeah.
All week?
Yeah. Besides the news, because I know we had a stressful episode last week.
We did.
Besides the news and the ongoing conflicts, I have been overall pretty healthy. Family's healthy. I'm healthy. Hit the gym 4 days this week. I got tired
I'll take it.
The other.
Did you get any good feedback from the last episode that helped?
Yeah, a lot of people.
Me too.
A lot of people, and I've been listening a lot more to people speaking, reading more, looking up more.
So you did the research after?
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did.
How about you?
I'll be honest, I've probably been at like a solid 8.5, 9.
Oh, wow.
Solely for work.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been, as I've told you 100 times this week, I can't find work.
Wow.
So it's just been so stressful.
Can't find workers.
Can't find workers.
Yeah. You know what? That's an ongoing issue.
Yeah, all around the country.
A lot of people can't find employees, and it's stressing businesses out, but we have to get back to work.
That's what we do. So I'm okay. I'm here. We're ready. Mentally, I'm healthy. Gym, boxing, working out. Things have been good. No
For
complaints. Sure. Everything else is probably a 10.
Excellent.
Yeah. Let's go to Marwa, see what she's
Marwa.
Mental health check. Emotionally, physically, mentally, how you felt all week, 1 to 10.
I'd like to say a 9. 9.5.
Nice.
Yeah.
9.5.
Yes. So me and my husband and I were able to take a nice long vacation. So
nice.
That was good.
Where'd you guys go?
We went to Bahamas.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that was nice. Work is work. I mean, we're seeing a lot more people coming in.
Yeah.
Because of the pandemic. So it's still pretty stressful, but all in all, doing really good.
Nice. Yeah. Nice. What kind of issues are you seeing more now that the pandemic has been taking its toll on people, right? Because we were all stressed out. Everyone has. I will. Well, I said in her introduction, therapist in clinical mental health counseling. I know you don't listen. Back to Marwa. Thanks for the interruption. So, so you've been seeing a lot more people, but we've all been having our issues through the lockdown because people who already have depression, anxiety, and so on and so forth struggle more than most during normal times. So for them to be under the current circumstances, that would take its toll more, right? So what kind of issues are you seeing more of now than you have before, or are you just seeing more of the same issues?
Yeah. So I mean, we're seeing a lot more of, you got the depression and anxiety with people being so locked up, regardless of whether they already had these mental health issues or these just came about during the pandemic. People really had to isolate themselves for a long period of time. Some people are still really scared to even go out of the house.
Really?
Yeah. So a lot of the depression, a lot of the anxiety, people are afraid.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
Yeah, and now with what we're doing, for the past year, we really haven't been typical with our therapy sessions. So we do a lot of telehealth now. So even that is different for people. It took them a while to get used to therapy over the phone as opposed to coming in the office, the comfort of, sitting on a couch and being face to face with their therapist. So even that was a little bit of a struggle for people to get used to. But yeah, I mean, you got people really struggling to socialize, and that is a big thing. That's a big coping technique that we use with depression and anxiety is you really have to get out, be active, socialize, and not seeing much of it lately.
That's terrible. That's terrible. So on the same subject, have you been seeing more than usual domestic violence issues, relationship problems where people come in for things they're dealing with at home now that they're all sitting there?
Oh, yeah. A lot of domestic violence situations, especially because we go back to people were at home. A lot of people couldn't go to work, and then you have the kids at home. So there was a lot of high-end, anxiety on both sides, both partners. So, yeah, a lot of the domestic violence rates were going up.
Okay.
Children in the home because of school. So yeah, I mean, it was really difficult. It's been really difficult. Yeah.
That's stressful. Now, on the same note, so getting right to the nitty gritty, we all have family, friends, or significant others who we view or call toxic. So let's run through some of those points. Yeah. Explain to us and our audience exactly what a toxic person is, what they do, and what are signs of toxicity.
Yeah. So basic definition, someone who is toxic is bringing negativity and upset in your life. That is really the basic definition. You see them a lot in, it could be friends, could be family, but a lot of it is in relationships. I believe that no relationship is perfect.
Sure.
So any type of relationship has a small amount of toxicity in it, right? You get into your casual arguments, your disagreements, but the difference with being in a toxic relationship and a healthy relationship. In a healthy relationship, you're coming in, after the argument, whether it's a few hours later, 24 hours later, you're able to have that conversation with your partner. You're able to empathize with your partner, understand their needs, and ends with an apology, move on. In a toxic relationship, that doesn't exist. There's no communication. A lot of the times, the person who, just for the sake of discussion, I'm gonna say the man in the relationship, and that is not to say that it's only men.
True.
That can be the toxic person or.
Sure, because I have female friends who are extremely toxic.
Right. But just for the sake of keeping it very
narrow, yes.
Yes, very narrow. Let me backtrack. In my work, what we typically see is the men being more of the aggressors.
Okay.
In this type of relationships. So back to what we were saying, the difference between healthy relationships and toxic relationships.
Sure. I'm sorry. But is it because men are just more afraid to come forward, or is it just doesn't happen?
I wouldn't say it doesn't happen. It definitely happens where the woman can definitely be the aggressor. It could be that men just don't come forward as much, but it is more common with men.
Okay. To be the aggressor.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So, in a toxic relationship, right, the typical argument that you might get into if you're in a healthy relationship that is kind of resolved after, a few hours or after the talk that you have, it takes a turn where the aggressor does not take responsibility. They're not able to empathize with that other person. They cannot communicate or understand the needs of the other person. So the person who was victimized and that in that sense really feels like they're the ones that wrong. They're the ones that did the wrong.
Because it gets spun on them.
Yeah.
Which leads us into manipulation.
So passing the blame is one of, if not the most common form of manipulation, just because I want people to be able to identify it, passing a blame. So if you're in a fight and instead of saying, I didn't know I made you feel this way, it becomes you did 1, 2, 3, and it just gets reiterated to the point where the person just gives up and takes that blame. Is that something is that one of the most, from what I've seen, the most common way that it gets done. But as a professional, is that what you see?
So yes, so victim blaming is a huge sign of manipulation, type of manipulation. You also have criticism, a lot of coercion.
Sure.
Threatening, that's a big one too. Yeah. Mistrust and control. I mean, those are the really big, I want to say red flags of manipulation that I see. And they all go hand in hand. I mean, you'd be pretty surprised how well the aggressor is able to spin any type of manipulation to really get there. Yeah.
Yeah, because they'll take anything and spin it and make it your fault. And from there you start to actually feel like it's your fault. So you think, no, you're right. It is my fault. I'm sorry. And then you bow out and continue on your merry way, and you continue the relationship, and then it just ends up becoming a vicious cycle. Because if let's say I'm the manipulator, if I'm manipulating you, I'm going to continue to do it. So then you A, think it's your fault, B, stay. You're not going anywhere, right? Because I already have that control over you.
Yeah, right. And that's all it's really about. It's about the aggressor trying to gain this power and control over that other person. And by them, blaming you or making it seem like they didn't do anything wrong, they're planting that seed of doubt in your mind.
Sure.
So then you begin to question yourself and question your reality. And a lot of that begins to really get into, I want to say, a lot of like the insecurities that people have, right?
Yeah.
So they use that. So become insecure. They use your weaknesses against you.
Sure. Interesting. And then do we learn? Go ahead.
So and I know we discussed red flags earlier, but just to make it, because I feel like this might be the most beneficial to people watching, do you have maybe not a list, but maybe like the most common things that happen that maybe people that are in this situation should start to be aware of to maybe realize that they're being victimized by
or manipulated
or in a toxic relationship? What are those like red flags? Like, I'm in a toxic relationship. Oh my God, I didn't realize it. What would you tell someone who may not know?
So it goes back to that list that we talked about, right? The criticism. If you are constantly being criticized with what you're wearing, what you're doing, how you're speaking, I mean, that in itself is a red flag,
your
right?
Goals,
where you feel
everything.
you feel like you can do no right in that person's eyes, where
everything you do is a shortcoming. No matter what it is, your food sucks, your clothing's weird, your personality is shitty, so on and so forth. So like everything you do, they look at and say,
it's not good enough for them. Control, big one is control, mistrust. I see a lot of it where women, just for the sake of discussion, they come and they tell me, well, I can be at work or I can be at a family's house and my partner thinks I'm cheating. So
wow. Interesting.
It's things like that where they're so little, but when you look at them, they really are just like, they're, like you said, red flags. They're just beaming
and they're
right
so
at
small.
They're so small, but
yeah.
In essence, they're not really small. You just brush them off because it could be just one small comment.
Sure.
But this is something that people have been dealing with for years.
Yeah, it starts off small and then it just grows, and you hardly even notice it.
Yeah,
because it's all done in such a discreet way, right? But we as children learn to manipulate our parents. I need a bottle, I'm gonna cry.
Right.
I am hungry, I'm gonna cry. I need attention, I'm gonna act out. So do we then bring that, is that where we learn manipulation? Do we learn it as children, or do we just, as we grow, just become more manipulative by nature because of our surroundings, or is it just from adolescence?
You're hitting like the most controversial topic ever in psychology and everything, which is the nature versus nurture topic. Whether this type of thing is inherited, genetic, or if it's something that we learn in our behavior. As children, we imitate our parents.
Sure.
Right? We mirror what we see our adults in our life doing. So children are growing up in a toxic household, in a toxic environment, and they see the aggressor doing these things to get their way, right?
Okay.
After a while, you start to see, okay, well, this parent can say these things or do these things, and they get what they want.
Sure.
So it is, I want to say it is a learned behavior. I wouldn't say, in my personal opinion, I don't believe that it is anything that is genetically inherited.
Okay.
I do believe that it is a learned behavior that we mirror. We mirror what we see.
Sure. Now, what if this person did not then observe a parent be manipulative or be toxic to their partner? Is this something that could be then learned or grown in our adult life? Do we just naturally become manipulative as adults?
So on that point, because I was literally thinking it.
Sure.
I can genuinely say my parents don't have a toxic relationship, a manipulative relationship. But as someone that somehow learned that behavior, I used to be very toxic. The
Same.
jokes I'd make,
Me too.
but I learned via therapy, via work, that it all stemmed from insecurity. It wasn't in this scenario with me, not as a whole.
Sure.
It was my insecurities came out against whoever I was talking to. If you're going out dressed that way, you must be cheating. You must be looking for someone's attention. You must be talking to someone else because I was talking to someone else. Like, everything was projected onto someone else. So I think it's a great question, and I'm curious to see how that like translates into everyone else. That is it just learned, or how do you identify if you're toxic through your own insecurities? You know what I mean? If it's not learned from your parents.
Well, I don't necessarily mean that it has to be learned from your parents, but it is a behavior that could be learned from different outlets, right? It could be from social media, from people you hang out with, from school. It's not necessarily that a certain behavior is learned from your parents, but you are right. I mean, it could definitely be manifested from your insecurities. And you are wondering how, as a person, you can tell if you are toxic
or manipulative.
It took me a while to see things that I was helping other friends deal with. Like, oh, why would they do that? That's super toxic. And it kind of like triggered in my mind, oh my God, I've done similar things. And I would think back on situations in my life, and I became aware, like, oh my God, I am a toxic person. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things have to change. And so I started to work at changing them. But I got lucky that something triggered that thought. How, like, I don't know if this is something that could be.
So you worked on yours.
I did, because luckily,
because you knew.
I was aware.
Okay.
Something woke me up to it. But if right now, if you could say something to someone watching, as a guy watching this, as a young girl watching this, what would you tell them to notice to kind of identify if they're a toxic person within themselves?
Or dealing with
a
toxic person. Recognize about
yourself
and
or
recognize.
Your partner. Yes.
Yep.
So let's address how you can, or what we can tell someone who is in a toxic relationship, right? If they are dealing with someone who is toxic. First thing I would say is support system. Support system is huge. Make sure you have a support system, someone that you trust, and really sit down and ask them what they've noticed. It's nice to get an outsider's point of view, but make sure that that person is someone you trust, where you don't feel
biased.
Like non-biased person.
Therapy, and we're going to get to how they can reach out to you at the end.
Yeah. Therapy is a great way, but in order to get to therapy, you have to know that there is something there that you want to work on.
Sure. Which, how do you recognize that? Yeah.
So listening to other people, I mean, I'm sure that there is at least one person in your life, and maybe in your life, since you used yourself an example, that may have said something and may have pointed it out to you. Be open to really, I don't want to say criticism, because we just talked about how negative criticism can be.
Constructive.
Feedback, right.
Yeah.
Pay attention to feedback, and really look at yourself in the mirror. Think about how it is that you're feeling in that moment when you are saying those things, or really what sort of feeling or thought is triggering you to respond in that manipulative way. That's really the best thing that I can maybe advise someone who feels like they could be that toxic person.
And now, even being in a toxic relationship, you could almost be emotionally groomed. Right? So you get groomed into believing that these things, which we've already kind of hit on. What is emotional grooming?
So emotional grooming is really when the aggressor sort of has a plan, right? To groom this person in order to really control them, to gain power over them. So it starts with something as small as really targeting that person. And a lot of times they target people that they feel like are vulnerable. Maybe people that don't have a bigger circle, people with a smaller support system, people that they can easily isolate. So that's where it starts. Starts with targeting and then gaining their trust. We talked about, I think you mentioned putting your best foot forward, which usually happens in the first couple of months, right? That's what they do.
Impressions.
Yes, they have best foot forward. They call it love bombing. So really showering this person with love and affection, which if we talk about it, we're like, oh, that's probably normal in a relationship.
At intervals? So they'll love bomb you at intervals? So this just happens
right in the beginning to kind of reel you in. And it's not the small things that we might be thinking about that we do in like a healthy relationship. It's maybe, it's excessive. Maybe within the first week, 2 weeks, it's, I love you, or here's a ring.
Wow.
Or, just really extravagant ways of showing that they love you. And then, after they build your trust, they really start to isolate you. So we talked about how they, will criticize and control you. So after they isolate you, then that's really when they are able to
manipulate, become toxic.
Yeah, that's when those are all different techniques that they're going to use, which is everything that you just mentioned.
Okay, which then leads us to gaslighting. What is gaslighting?
Gaslighting. So with gaslighting, it really makes you question your reality pretty much. I think you hit on it a little bit, planting that seed of doubt. And I think the best way to get people to understand what gaslighting is maybe just to give out an example. It might be an extreme example, but it does happen. Let's say man and woman, right? They're at a party, you're drinking, very casual. The next day, girl wakes up and she's like, I've been sexually assaulted. She knows she's been sexually assaulted. She goes to confront this person, this male. And he responds, well, you've just been drinking too much. It didn't happen. She knows it happened. She feels it. She knows it happened. But he's responding, well, it didn't happen. You were just drunk. You gave me consent. I know you did. You wanted it. So now in her mind, he's planted the seed of doubt. So now she begins to question herself. So I think that is the best way to think about it with gaslighting is really they make you question your own reality. They make you question your own sanity.
Okay. But then how do we recognize these patterns? How do we know? Do we know? Can we know when we're being gaslit?
Yes.
Because it's not just necessarily relationships where you're being, it can happen in friendships, it can happen in any capacity, family relations, it could happen anywhere. So is there a way to detect or know or recognize when you are being gaslit?
You really have to be in tune with how you're feeling. If you're starting to feel very anxious, if you're distrusting yourself, you feel like you can't rely on yourself, you begin to constantly question yourself. I think that is when you have to start paying attention to as to why am I feeling this way? And once you start to ask yourself those questions and you start to look at the people around you and, really be in the moment to the things and the comments they're making, you're able to, they might not know it's gaslighting. Gaslighting is not a common term we use. But they will know that, hey, this is something that's going on.
Okay. Now, I heard this the other day, and I thought it was super important. I heard it on an interview. Somebody said the quote, but they didn't reference who it was. Father Richard Rohr was quoted in saying, if you do not transform your pain, you will transmit it. In that pain and suffering that are not transformed are then usually projected onto others. Do you believe that to be true? Do you believe that if we do not have the ability, like you, to kind of backtrack, to cure what we are already feeling, we are bound to project it? Or do you think, because I feel like we've already kind of hit on, we either learn it or we naturally just become it. Do you believe it to be true? Do you believe that we have to cure our pain or we will project?
Yeah, I that's really common also with a lot of aggressors. Not every aggressor, but a lot of aggressors also come with their own pain and their own trauma and their own insecurities. A lot of the times we see, aggressors or perpetrators of domestic violence, they may have had some childhood trauma themselves. So in a sense, yes, it does get, if they don't deal with their own trauma, it will get projected onto their partner or in that relationship. That's not to say that what they're doing is okay because they've gone through that trauma, because absolutely it's not. I mean, a lot of perpetrators, a lot of aggressors do come with their own trauma. A lot of times it is childhood trauma. But if it's not resolved, it can be projected later on in their lives because they haven't been able to deal with everything that they had gone through.
Yes.
So, just given the essence of this episode, we've learned statistically that men are typically the aggressors. This is a woman, and this is a therapist. So, of course, we spent a lot of time identifying how a woman and or the person, the victim, can identify that they're in a toxic relationship. But I do just want to take this one moment to say that via trauma, via things I've been through in my life, as I stated earlier, that I did project those insecurities and that toxicity onto other people. Sure. But I just want to say that there is a strength in admitting to yourself that you are the problem. Because I think there is a lot of guys, and I can't speak for women.
You have to admit that you're the problem.
You have to wake up and say, I have been doing 1, 2, 3. Why am I doing 1, 2, 3? And then accepting that I'm unhappy about all of this.
And make your amends.
Make your amends. This happened to me when I was younger. My dad left. My mom beat me.
My father was abusive, mentally, physically.
Exactly. Whatever your story is, own it and understand that you have to work through it to actually get the healthy relationship you want in the future.
With current, past, and future relationships, you have to admit it because those relationships deserve mending.
Absolutely. And your future
relationships
leave
them where they are. Current and future relationships deserve a good version of you, or don't ruin people's lives by going in there, being toxic, ruining them mentally, because I'm sure you've seen where, what do we call them? Patients?
Clients. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think where you're trying to go with is, making sure that you're okay before entering that or healing your traumas before entering a relationship and bringing someone else down. And I think you're getting ready to ask what we see with people.
And they deserve the best version of you.
Yeah, of course. They definitely deserve the best version of you. Yeah. But what I see with a lot of the clients being in those toxic relationships, the victims, they're so torn down after the years that they lack that self-confidence. They have no self-esteem. So they have to rebuild that because that aggressor, their partner has diminished it. After so many years of someone telling you can't do anything right, or,
you're stupid,
you're ugly,
you're this, you're that.
You're worthless. Sadly enough, you start to believe that. Wow. So what we do is we do a lot of building up that self-confidence, but it takes time.
Absolutely. Now, in your work, have you seen that a lot of these subject matters, toxicity, manipulation, and gaslighting, lead to physical violence?
Almost all my cases.
Wow.
Almost all my cases.
They all? That's crazy. That's crazy. And then how do you help them? With the physical aspect of it, so are these people who are still in the relationship? Are they out of the relationship? What are you doing?
We get I see a mix. Most of the time, they've separated from that person, so they're just here to start healing their trauma. All the physical abuse. But we do have clients that come in and they are still with their husband, their fiance, their boyfriend. Most of the time, it's the husband. Wow. So we do. I mean, we help them get their divorce started if they're interested in, if they need some safe housing. First thing we make sure is that they're completely safe, right? Them, their children, make sure that they're safe, they're taken care of. And then we start with the therapy. It takes time for people they might be physically safe, but emotionally, mentally, they're not safe.
If ever.
I mean, it takes time. I have clients that, they've been out of the relationship for 10 plus years, but yet it still feels like it was yesterday for them.
Traumatizing. Wow. That's crazy. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put your information down in the description. I thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment what you'd like to see on future episodes. My name is Mehdi.
And I'm Ramsey.
And I'm Marwa.
And this is what they won't say.